Hi, my name is Eric Johnson, and I'm a Senior Developer Advocate for Serverless at AWS. And today, we're going to be talking about building serverless applications with infrastructure as code. Now, if you don't know what infrastructure as code is, don't worry. I'm going to bring you up to speed a little bit. Now, full disclosure, this is a 30-minute session. I could talk about infrastructure as code for 30 days or 30 years. There's a lot to digest there, but I just want to get your appetite whet so you can kind of see what that looks like when building serverless applications. So let's get started. So in our agenda today, we're going to be doing an introduction to serverless or infrastructure as code for serverless specifically. We're going to create our first application, or I'm going to kind of talk you through what that looks like. We're going to be making our template, because that's what infrastructure as code is. We're going to be making that reusable. We do infrastructure as code so that we can put it to multiple places, use multiple accounts, environments, things like that. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to prepare for deployment and look at deploying to multiple environments. And then we're actually going to deploy an application. And we're going to do it all in a demo at the end. I'm going to talk all about it, and then we're going to do the demonstration. So let's get started. Now, before we get started, now that I've said that, I do want to tell you, like I said, I'm going to be going pretty fast. There's a lot to cover here, but I've built a page for you at s12d.com/SVS204 that has a link to a lot of stuff I'm going to be talking about. Some things to be aware of is that I have a session called Sessions with SAM. We're going to talk about SAM today, so don't worry if you don't know what that means. That covers a lot of what I'm going to talk about today and more. So I encourage you to look at that session. There's about 20 or 30 videos in there about building with infrastructure as code, using multiple environments, different things like that. So with that, let's jump in. So infrastructure as code. What is infrastructure as code? Well, what it is, that the name's kind of in the name itself, or the definition is kind of in the name. What we look at doing is many times people start with serverless, or really anywhere with cloud environments, is they start in the console, right? And we're pointing and clicking, we build and everything like that. And that's a great way to learn. That works. But the problem is when you come along and go, okay, let's move that to this account, or let's move that to this environment, or somehow replicate what you've done in the console. And then it's like, if you're like me, it's like, I don't remember how I did that. And so what we look to do is we look to move out of the console and move to templates, or a way to store our infrastructure so that it can be reusable. So with infrastructure as code, you're going to automate the provisioning process. That means we're not going to point and click. We're actually going to say, okay, like with SAM, we deploy, or we push, or there's different mechanisms depending on what you're using. We're going to instantiate our infrastructure using configuration files. And I referred to that earlier, and we have a template. And so this idea is, here's all the steps and configuration in a template file versus, here, hey, point here, click here, do that. So what this allows us to do is treat our configuration files as code. What do you do with code? Well, you version it. The first thing we do is we get it up in some kind of repo, like GitHub or code commit or something like that, where we can say, all right, here's a version. Now I'm going to work on it some more. Now I'm going to merge a new version. And so you can roll back if you need to. And so with moving to infrastructure as code, you can do the same thing with your infrastructure. Oh, that infrastructure is not working. Let's roll it back, or let's try a new version, or let's move it over here. And finally, this allows you to eliminate configuration drift through automation. How many times have you said, well, it worked on my machine, why doesn't it work here? And the reality is, when we built it locally in development, we added different libraries, we added a new service, we did all kinds of things to our infrastructure. And we might have remembered to do that to staging. Okay, do that on staging when we build it, things like that. But we didn't do it with production. And so we get it out there and it all fails. With this, rather than having that drift in environments, you manage it in a central location or authority through the template, and then you push the infrastructure changes through. So there you go. Now you eliminate that drift. Now we have several IAC, or infrastructure as code solutions, at AWS. Our primary one is AWS CloudFormation. A lot of the other ones will export to that, or finally, they're built on top of that. The one we're primarily going to talk about today is AWS Serverless SAM, which is the serverless application model. And then there's also the AWS Cloud Development Kit, which allows you to do it a little more as code itself. So lots of options there. There are also third parties like Terraform or Serverless.com or Chalice, different things like that. So let's jump in. So like I said, today we're primarily going to be talking about SAM. What is SAM? SAM is the Serverless Application Model. That's what it stands for, although we have this cute little squirrel. We call him Sam the Squirrel. If you watch Twitter long enough, not a joke, you'll see me in a squirrel outfit at some point or other. There it is. You can find me on Twitter at EDJGeek. There are videos out there, not proud, but they are out there. So SAM comes in two parts, okay? The first is the AWS SAM templates, which we've already talked about. We're going to climb into a little more. And that allows you to, as we talked about, to version your infrastructure as code. The second, though, is the AWS SAM CLI, or command line interface. And this is a utility or application that you install on your local machine that helps you with local development, debugging, builds, and deploys for your serverless applications. And you'll see that in the demonstration that we'll show in a little bit. All right, so an example of the template looks like this. Okay, in here, I'm showing where I configure an AWS Lambda. I configure the IAM role through one of our policy statements. The really cool thing here is when I put this into the template using SAM, which is and using the serverless application model, SAM is going to say, okay, tell me what you want. So I want in this example, we're using the DynamoDB read policy. Now tell me the table name. And it builds a granular IAM policy that says only this Lambda can read from this DynamoDB table. And it builds that out for you. So it's very granular. If I needed to write to this, I could also add, I can have more than one policy. I can say DynamoDB write policy. And we have a whole list of those, and I link to that in our resources. But this makes it very easy to handle IAM and security, which is obviously very critical. The next thing we're creating is an API gateway. So we're actually right in here on the Lambda function. I can say my event source is HTTP API, and it'll actually create the HTTP API and tie it into the Lambda function as an event source. And on this, we're doing it on the path products, and the product ID, I can pass a variable there. And I can say get, I can say the method I want. And then finally, we're building an Amazon DynamoDB table. And that's just a simple line. This is what's using a serverless simple table. If I need to build more complex table, add secondary keys, indexes, things like that, then I could actually still use the CloudFormation or the DynamoDB resource of table. And that's something to note here. While I'm showing you, and you look at the type for each of these are AWS serverless types. You can still use in SAM templates regular CloudFormation templates. So you have regular CloudFormation resources. So you have a lot of flexibility in what you can do here. Now, with these 20 lines of code, what we're able to do is say this becomes this. And this is our infrastructure. Here's our API gateway endpoint. Here's the Lambda function behind it, the Lambda function connecting to the table. The API gateway's permission to invoke the Lambda is already created because SAM inherently knows that obviously needs to happen if you set it up as an event. And then we added the policy saying that we could only read from the table, and the roles created there. So that's a quick overview of SAM templates. I would give you this link. I do an hour-long session on walking through the different serverless resources and SAM CLI at the s12d.com/master SAM link. All right, so we've kind of given you this overview. This is SAM. This is kind of infrastructure as code for serverless. So let's look at creating our first application. All right. So to do this, you're going to need SAM installed on your local machine. You don't need it for this demo. Don't scramble. You relax. You can watch this later. Or again, I give you links to videos. But if you do want to install SAM and it's not there, go ahead and you can go to this link, s12d.com/SAM install, and of course the QR code. All right. So using SAM, the way SAM is going to work, and it'll make more sense when I do the demo, is you're going to do you're going to call SAM init, and then it's going to allow you to choose what kind of template you want, because we give you some templates to start with. You don't have to write it from scratch. So you're going to say, all right, I want there's some different AWS managed ones, like a simple hello world, which is what we're looking at here, or maybe a web backend, or we've got some stock stuff in some of the different runtimes. So you can pick your template. The next thing you do is you can select your runtime. You're going to say, I want to use Node, I want to use Python, I want to use Ruby, I want to use Go, I want to use Java, .NET Core, or maybe a custom runtime. So you have a lot of different options that you can use here. Then if the runtime offers it, you can choose your dependency manager. And then finally, you're going to name your application. And the results are something like this. You can see here the structure of my applications, very simple. I've got a README with some instructions. I've got the events. That in events, so if you're not familiar with serverless, Lambda is an event-based system. So you have to have an event to trigger the Lambda function. And so we create these events as test events for local testing, which I'll show you in a little bit. And then there's the Hello World folder that contains everything I need for the Hello World function. This is going to be the app.js, which has my function code. In this is you probably figured it out already, this is a Node application. I've got my package.json, which is my dependency manifest. It has my dependencies. And then I've got some tests that are written, and in particular, the unit tests. The next thing we've got is our template.yaml file. And the template.yaml file is the SAM template that we've been talking about. So that's what SAM init does for you. There's a lot of options you can do. You can do this, the runtimes, you can do it automated, different things like that. Take a look at this. I also have a video on this called the SAM init video at s12d.com/sam-init-vid. All right. So the whole goal that we've been talking about with infrastructure as code is to make these templates reusable. If I need to redo something, I want it to be simple, right? So why? So let's take a look. We could just say, you know what? I test in production, and you hear people joke about that. I have one environment, it's production, and it works all the time. That's usually not the truth, is it? The reality is we need different environments. So I'm going to tell you some best practices with serverless, and it looks more like this. So what you've got is you're going to have generally best practice to have a developer account for each developer. So when you set this up, you're going to say, okay, Bob gets this, Jane gets this, Susie gets this, whatever, right? So they each get their own account. And then you're going to use the same template to do that. Now, also environments like beta, staging, production should have their own account. Now, there's inherent security in this and saying only folks who get to deploy to production should have access to production. Same with staging, things like that. So that's one thing you get out of it. You also get these isolated environments that take advantage of some of the like, for instance, an Amazon API gateway gets 10,000 invokes per second per region, right? Or per account, per region, per account. And so by piling all your APIs into one account, you can't share those up. But if you spread them across accounts, you still pay for the same amount of invokes, but you get those 10,000 for your throttling. So some things to know there. So like I said, we have this, and by breaking this out and using the same template, you ensure consistency across these environments. You don't have to have all right, write down, check it. And I can tell you, I've worked with customers like, all right, so what does your environment look like? Well, they pull out the legal sheet and go, we follow these steps. Or, you're onboarding a new developer. Here's how you set it up. And it's a book, rather than just saying, there's the template, deploy. All right. So we want to make these reusable. We want this template to be able to say, I want to use it regardless of the environment I'm in. And environment I'm in. Well, I just kind of ran off on that one. And in order to do that, we parameterize the templates. We make it have dynamic values that change based on how you're approaching it. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, and I'll show some of that in the demo. But let's take a look at this. Now, this is a lot of text, and I know that, but I kind of want to give you some ideas, and these are just some of them, okay? And I'll talk more about secrets and things like this in that Mastering SAM, so I really encourage you to watch that if you want to know more about this. But the first way that we can parameterize your template to make it dynamic is through template parameters. And these are parameters declared in the template itself and are expected to be passed in when you deploy or update your Lambda function. And these are added or created at update or deploy. So you can't change these afterwards. You have to redeploy the function. That's fine. And use that works for these kind of, but something to know when you choose which way you're going to use parameters. Okay. They can be typed and validated. And they're stored on the deployment machine. So you don't want to use, so like the developer machine, whoever happens to be doing it, it's kind of stored there or passed in. This isn't really where you want to keep your secrets. This is simple things like, hey, what environment is this? Is this dev? Is this staging? If you need that kind of flag. Or very simple things that is not for secrets and passwords and such. The second is environment parameters. Also not for secrets and parameters if you don't need to. These are added at creation and update. They're stored in open text on the console. So understand that if 20 people have access to this account, they can go and they can see that in the open text, right? So again, probably not where you want to store your secrets. They're dynamically referenced in the template. All right, so you can grab them through code, but you can't change them. All right, the next is the AWS Systems Manager parameter store. And I'm going to combine the next two and AWS Secrets Manager. So these are very similar in how they work. And what you want to do is you're able to add them at creation and update or runtime. These can be accessed in your code. So if it's something you need to grab on every invoke, then this might be a good place to store this. Systems Parameter Store works on some values within the template, but not all of them. So you want to make sure you understand where that works, and we're not going to break down into that right now, but I do have a Sessions with Sam session where I talk about this, and it's linked in there. Secrets Manager works with a lot more of them, especially for encrypted values. So you could start with Parameter Store, and you might have to move to Secrets Manager. Both, again, are added at creation up to update, or can be added at runtime. And you can see, like I said, with Systems Manager Parameter Store compatible with some resources, and System Secrets Manager is compatible with most resources. All right, and the final way is through the app config. App config is part of our System Manager, and it allows you to set configurations for your Lambda function. And we have this really cool thing that we put out here just recently called extensions. And there's several examples of the app config extension, and I link to it in our resources, where you can say, use an extension to grab a configuration from app config, but only grab it every 20 minutes. And then as Lambda functions invoke, they can quickly grab that from the extension. So great way of, if you need to change something a lot, but you don't want to call it on every invoke, this is a great solution. The other way of parameterizing your templates is through functions and parameters. CloudFormation, which SAM is based upon, CloudFormation has the idea of intrinsic functions, and it allows you to do logic within the template. And you can get, you can do some conversion like base64, some transforms. You can substitute, string substitutes, split, import values from another template that you've created. And so there's a lot of ways you can grab dynamic value as needed. And the other is pseudo parameters. There are a lot of times where we need to reference, what region am I in? Am I in US West? Am I in US East? Especially with if you're building an ARN in the template. And you don't want to hard code that. You don't want to say, this is the region that I'm in, because you don't know. So instead, you can actually use a pseudo parameter, AWS : region. Same with account number, or there's all kinds of things. Partition, you could pass a no value. Some things need to have a null, so this can pass a no value. So very strong way of parameterizing that. And I do more on this in this s12d.com/secrets. And then for that app config that I talked about just a moment ago, take a look at this one here, s12d.com/app config extensions, or ext, excuse me. All right. So let's prepare for deployment. We've taken our template, we've gone through, we've got it worked out. Now we want to deploy. So SAM CLI has this wonderful little command called SAM build. And man, is that a powerful command. There's a lot of things going on here. First of all, you can build with native runtime. So you say, hey, if I'm using Java, I can't talk, Java or Node, build with that. You can also do a custom build using a make file. Gives you a lot of flexibility there. And and I do this a lot, I may not have all the runtimes configured, but a lot of the runtimes are supported through what we call a use container. So if you say SAM build -- use container, then it'll actually grab a container that is based on the environment that the Lambda function will run in, and it'll build that out for you. And something like Python is supported in that, as well as Java, some of the others. All right, you can build, we now have where you can pass a cached or parallel flag. The cache says, hey, cache this build. So let's say I have 10 Lambdas and I make a change to 1. So when I do the build, 9 of them will be cached, but only 1 will need rebuilding. Makes the builds much faster. You can also build in parallel now. So I can say -- cached or -- parallel, and it will, instead of building one, then the next, it'll build them all at the same time. And it makes, again, deployment or local development much faster. All right, so And you can also do omission. So if you have a folder and you want to say, hey, this is going to be my source code, then I'm going to push that out. Omit, maybe I have tests under there, or omit different things. So you have a lot of flexibility there. I have under the Sessions with SAM link that I'm going to give you a little bit later. I have this wonderful, wow. I have this project on building Swift custom runtime using the make file. So I can build a Swift Lambda function. So if you're not familiar with Swift, it's what's used with iOS. So if you're an iOS developer and you want to build a backend for your application, you can use Swift as well, and you can use SAM and the custom build to deliver it. So what happens is when you do SAM build, it actually creates a separate folder and it isolates each of the functions into their own build, right? So it says, okay, it will actually grab the dependencies based in the dependencies manifest, and it'll grab everything you need for that Lambda function to work, and then it'll zip it up and push it out. Or if you're using the new container image support for Lambda functions, it will link that. It'll actually create a local image, container image, and then it'll push it to an ECR repository when we do SAM build or SAM package a little later. For more about SAM build, you can check out s12d.com/SAM build. All right, so what have we done so far? We've created our application. We have built out, or we've prepared our template to work across multiple environments. And then we have learned how to build our application. So our application is ready to go. So how do we deploy it? Well, let's talk about deploying our application. And again, we turn back to SAM, the SAM CLI, and we say SAM deploy. Okay, so SAM deploys or updates serverless applications on AWS. Okay, it's going to manage, if you're using the zip format, it's going to manage the AWS S3 bucket to hold the zip format for you. If you're using the container image format, you're going to tell it the ECR repos that you want to use, and it will push those for you. You can use the guided deploy, which will actually save your parameters. So it'll ask questions, and you'll see this in the demo. It'll ask you questions. It'll save all the information you need into a deployment. And you can make multiple profiles in that, or what we call environments. So let's take a look here. So when it does deploy, it will actually create a CloudFormation change set, something to understand. So what it'll do is it'll go out and it'll say, okay, here's the template, CloudFormation, I want you to create a change set. So compare with what's already out there. Now, if it's a brand new deploy, it's going to deploy. But compare what's already out there and what needs to be changed, and it only updates the changes, or it'll kick it back if there's a problem. Says, now this isn't going to work. So you need to look at that. So you're able to use SAM to deploy to multiple environments, right? So like we've been talking about, we've said, hey, we can push to dev, we can push to stage. Most likely your stage and production should be done through CI/CD pipelines. And I encourage, if you're not, I encourage you to automate that. Automate all the things. That's just best practice. Saves you from having to get up in the middle of the night more often. With that, we've talked about coming all the way to deploy. So let's see it in action. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to build a quick application. In our scenario, we're going to build for, let's say I've got a contest going on, and you've got to go and you've got to get a token. All right, so we need a service that's going to generate a token. And then you're going to take that token and you're going to go to another link or website and you're going to redeem that token. Okay, now I didn't build a front end for this. I'm just going to show you the back end for this, but we're going to build that out. Now, what we're also doing is there's several things we're going to do. I've got two environments we're going to look at. I've got a development and a staging environment. The development environment is going to encode. We're going to return a token. It's going to be an encrypted token with some information in it, but it's going to be encoded with a salt that says, hey, this should only be development. Another one is going to be used for staging, and another for production. And to do that, I'm using the systems, there's the secrets manager that I referred to earlier. So what I've already done is I've gone to the secrets manager in the two accounts that I'm going to show you in this, and I've added the same token with different values to each. So depending on where SAM is being deployed in account A or in account B, it's going to grab the proper value. So that's a really good way of contextually saying what the value should be. Bottom line, best practice, use Secrets Manager or Parameter Store when you can. It just makes life easier. All right, so let's build our token generation, our contest website. So the first thing we want to do, like I said, to kind of build our applications, we're going to use SAM init. And that's going to then ask me, hey, what templates do you want to use? Do you have some, or do you want to use one of ours? I choose one for that. I choose one for zip, and I choose node, one for node, and then I'm going to name it token generator. Okay. So what happens is it builds it out, and then it asks me, what template do you want? So I'm going to use the hello world example. That's usually where I start, and then I build it out from where I want. So let's go in there. And if I just look at the file structure here, you can see what I showed you earlier in the presentation. It's all here. Here's my README, my events, my hello world, my app.js, and so on. So now we do have the template.yaml file in here. So let's go in and take a look. I'm just going to Vim this real quick. This is about all I can do in Vim. You can see here I've got my global section, which we'll talk about in a minute. Here's my hello world function. This describes everything, as well as the outputs to let us know, hey, here's the API endpoint, so we can go to it and test it. All right, so let's go ahead and go to, I've actually modified this for our application. So let's go into Visual Studio Code, and you can see here that I've changed the structure a little bit, right? So I've got in here, I've got some events for testing that I showed earlier. I've got a redeem and a token for each function. I've got my redeem application with the app.js and my token application with the app.js. That's where the code is stored. And I've got my template file. Let's go in there. All right, so a couple of things when we talk about parameters. First of all, let's show I've got here, I've updated this, there's my globals, I've expanded that, we'll get into that. Here's my token function, here's my redeem function, and each one of these are using HTTP API as an event source. It's the same invocation. And here's my DynamoDB table. And this is a simple two-line. I'm creating this. I'll create a DynamoDB table capacity with just an ID. Now, I refer to, the first thing I'm doing to parameterize this is a parameter that I'm pushing in, and that's contact email, and that'll give the winner an email to contact. And I reference that using a pseudo parameter. An intrinsic function. I use another intrinsic function to grab the DynamoDB table name. Both of these are inserted as environment variables to all the functions in the application via the global section. The last one I use is my Secrets Manager resolver. I use a resolve, I grab from Secrets Manager, and I grab the token key, and it gives me the secret key, and it injects that secret salt key as an environment variable in my account. All right, now that we've got that put out there, let's go ahead and build this. I'm going to use my parallel and cached, and I'm going to build this here real quick. Now, I have sped this up just a little bit, but it's still pretty quick, all right? So now that I've built it, we're going to go ahead and deploy this, if I can spell properly. We're going to go ahead and deploy this using the guided deploy. So I name it token generator, and then it's going to ask me for the region. So I'm going to use US West 2, that's closest to me. That's what I tend to use. For my contact email, because this is just a dev environment, I'm going to put a fake email in here, fake@amazon.com. I prefer you not send things there. That'd be great. And then it asks me, do you want to confirm changes before deployment? It means no, I don't need to. So in this question is say, hey, this function does have any authorization. Are you sure that's okay? Yeah. The same for the redeem function. And then it asks me, do you want to save these in a configuration file? And here's the configuration file. And then the environment is default. And that default is fine for me because that's what I'm going to push. The default is what I want. I want to accidentally go to development, never to production. So my deploy is done, and I've got an endpoint that I can use here to test and see if it works. So let's see if it works. So I jump over to my browser, there we go, and I'm going to go to the endpoint there. And this is just a API-generated endpoint. You can put a custom domain on this. And looky there, we get some data. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and blow that up so you can see it a little better here. And all right, so now you see I have the token, and we're going to grab that, and I'm going to go to /redeem and /token. And I've redeemed my token, and I get my ID, and I get my contact. So everything works. Pretty happy about that. So now that that works, what do we do next? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at testing locally. I don't have to deploy or continue to deploy to test this. So I'm going to invoke using SAM local invoke the token function. I pass it a test event, and I pass it a locals.json file, which I created that has all the environment variables created in production. This allows me to test. I'm actually testing against, well, not production, but in the cloud, my DynamoDB table. right? So I'm able to test locally, but use cloud resources. You see that it worked. I got my token. I could then test the redeem if I wanted to, but I'm going to show you a different way to test this. What if you build a local website? So you can actually do local start API -n locals.json. And just last night, and it'll be a month when you see this, we added warm containers. So add the -- warm containers to that. You can see that it's running. It's actually a local version of an HTTP emulator. And I can curl that by hitting localhost :3000 and just hit enter here. And you can see it working on the left side, and I got my response back, and I got a token just as if I were in or hitting the website. I can take that same one, and I can curl it again, but add the /redeem /token, and let's see if the data works. It does. Woo! It works. So we get that. So you see that I'm testing locally. So as I change that, I can change the code, and the code it'll automatically be caught and updated the next time I invoke it. So, all right, so the next thing we need to do is we're going to go ahead and deploy to another account. Okay, so I'm going to do the deploy -g again. If I'm just deploying the same thing, I don't have to do the guided. But I'm going to add a profile because I want it to look to my test account. Okay, same name, same region. I'm going to change the email this time because I want staging to be as close to production as it can be. So I'm going to change the email to ericdj, if I can spell right, at amazon.com. That is my real email address. I encourage you to hit me if you need help or on Twitter. Don't need to confirm the changes. This is the changes on deployment. I want to create the role, and then I'm going to tell it it's okay that these are not authorized. I want to save to configuration file. Now here I'm changing the environment. I'm saying this is a staging environment. So now I'm deploying to another account. Crazy. All right, so it's hitting another account. I did speed up these deploys, full disclosure, not too much, but just so you know. All right, so I've got this new API endpoint that I can look at. Let's jump over to my browser, and we're going to do another tab and see how that works. So going into this other tab, we're going to paste this URL and see what data we get back. And it works. Let's blow that up so you can see it a little better. Great. So I'm going to take that token, and again, I'm going to take the same API, and I'm going to add the redeem path. So /redeem /token. I'm passing this as a path parameter, and there's my data. It worked. Now, let's check this out. To prove it's two different accounts, I'm going to copy that data, and I'm going to paste it on the first one we did. Okay, so I paste that in there, and I look, and what happens? That token cannot be found. So that's two different versions of my application going. And with that, we've built our first serverless application. Now, this was a pretty simple example, but you got the idea of how do I create an application? How do I get it ready for for building? How do I get ready to work in multiple accounts? And so we updated the template and looked at how parameters work. We looked at SAM build. How do I take and build an application so that it's all ready? And what SAM build does is just that. It creates those new artifacts. If I'm using if I'm doing SAM local and I change that, it updates that. So. And finally, we deployed. Now, a couple of things on this. So both times you saw me use SAM deploy -g, that's to go through the guided deploy. I can certainly pass flags on the console so that I don't have to do a guided. So if you're doing something through CI/CD, there are flags to handle these. The other thing is if I'm just doing a deploy and I'm not changing any of my parameters, I can just do SAM deploy. I don't have to do the guided, and it goes right in and uses all the parameters from that template. To choose between the environments, I say SAM deploy, and then I do --config environment, config -environment, and then I pass stages. So --config-env space staging, and that will deploy to my staging. But I made it so I have to be deliberate about that because Eric will deploy to the wrong account. So I'm deliberately making myself add those flags if I want to push it to staging or production. Download all the resources for this at s12d.com/sbs204. This page is hosted on serverlessland.com. And so I encourage you to check that out. Serverlessland.com is built and maintained by the AWS Developer Advocate Team. So folks like Julian and James and Rob and Ben and of course Chris Munns and myself, we constantly are adding our content to this. And so anything serverless, man, this is your go-to page. With that, I'm going to say thank you. Again, my name is Eric Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at EricDJ. I'm sorry, that's not true. EDJ Geek. I can talk. So Twitter, EDJ Geek. My email is ericdj@amazon.com. I hope you're having a great week, and serverless for everyone. Thank you.